break in now. Good evening again from Washington. Bret Baier, Martha MacCallum. I tell you, Martha, that video, it does bring up the thoughts and feelings of that day. It was heinous. It was dark. And there were a lot of new pieces of video and audio that came in with that 11-minute piece. What struck me was two things. One is Benny Thompson saying, January 6th was the culmination of an attempted coup, a brazen attempt at overthrowing the government. The violence was no accident. It represented Trump's last, most desperate chance to halt the transfer of power. Everything was focused on former President Trump, laying it out in this narrative as it was. We should point out that committee hearings aren't like this. This isn't usually how it works. There aren't usually teleprompters. There aren't sound bites that lawmakers toss to. This is a made-for-television event to lay out this narrative that they will do over several committee hearings.
It does bring back, certainly, the moments of watching that. I think every American who watched it felt, sort of a gut punch when you see them breaking through the doors and the windows of the Capitol. Overall, I would say that we were told that there was going to be things we hadn't seen or heard before. I don't think there was a lot of new ground that was really pushed here in terms of things we haven't seen.
As of yet.
As of yet, they have 7 of these hearings over the course of it. I think most of this, though, are the kinds of things that we've seen and heard before. Even in the video, I think we have seen even more aggressive, more violent video in the past, and that we've witnessed. They didn't show what happened to Ashley Babbitt in that video. She's the only person who was shot and killed in the middle of this melee. She was trying to breach that door of the main chamber, and so she was repelled. The question that you touch on with Benny Thompson laying out the president's culpability here, I think is one of the big questions, and I know we're going to bring in our panel and talk to them about this as well, whether or not they're laying a case that would prompt the Justice Department to take action that they haven't already taken. 840 people have been arrested in 50 states. You've got 185 of those cases that have been adjudicated and received sentences, 80 incarceration, and 57 doing home incarceration. So penalties have been meted out for the behavior that we just watched.
Arrests happening even today.
Absolutely.
Let's bring in our panel. George Washington University Law School professor Jonathan Turley, Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina, Jessica Tarloff, co-host of The Five, and our intrepid congressional correspondent Chad Pergram up on Capitol Hill. Jonathan, I want to start with you. Your thoughts about this as they lay, I guess, the predicate for how this is all going to come out.
Well, you put it best at the beginning when you said this is like an opening statement. The problem is there's no opposing counsel, and that's one of the most striking aspects. We've had these committees historically, and they've been important. We've had commissions and committees for Watergate, Pearl Harbor, some of our wars, and they've always had this very strong bipartisan bench. And the public can gain some credibility, some authenticity from that. Here, you just don't have an opposing party. You have 2 Republicans that are very critical, obviously, of the president. And I think that's what is sort of undermining this. But the other question is, what is it that they're trying to prove? Are they trying to prove that Donald Trump is a horrible person? You might get a majority on that by the end of these hearings. Or are you actually trying to show that there was a crime that was committed? And that's where these interstitial disconnects really mount up. There isn't a crime of omission for failing to call people back from the Capitol. It doesn't mean that you don't bear responsibility. It doesn't mean that you're not culpable in the moral sense. But the question is, are you trying to establish something legal or something political?
Trey, there was obviously an effort to sell a stolen election, according to the former president. They went through Bill Barr. Let's take a listen to that soundbite, the Attorney General talking about what he told the president at the time.
I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
And we added the beep pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. Trey, listen, you headed up the Benghazi committee. You had Democrats that were appointed by Nancy Pelosi on that committee. To Jonathan's point, there was an opposition point of view. What is your thought about how this committee hearing is starting?
Well, I mean, speaking of A.G. Barr, it's compelling, it's probative, it's just not new. So what I was looking for, I mean, we all know that Bill Barr, he wrote a book about it. So I'm looking for things that are both probative and new, and actually wrote 3 down. I think it is new if, in fact, the president knew he lost. If, in fact, he knew he lost the election, that's new. I've never heard him say that. So if they have testimony on that, I think that's important. If he knew the fraud was not dispositive, yeah, there's fraud, but it's not dispositive, to A.G. Barr's point. The thing I really highlighted, Bret and Martha, if he really thought that hanging Mike Pence was a good idea, then that is both probative and new. But to Professor Turley's point, it also has to be fair. And when you get to call all the witnesses and you get to select which excerpts to read or play or which videos, ours is an adversarial system. I mean, every major court decision is based on adversarial. So there needs to be more of that for the jury to buy it.
Jessica, when you look back at the Watergate hearings, they had a panel of 7, 3 Republicans, 4 Democrats in the course of that. And we're not seeing that here because we see that all of these members were selected by Nancy Pelosi. They were all picked by a Democrat. It's not like, you know, picking teams in kickball where each side gets to pick somebody until you've got the teams.
Yeah, and there were Republicans that were rejected for being part of this, but they were also Republicans who fundamentally don't accept the thrust of this investigation, people who believe that Donald Trump won the election in 2020, people who participated in the Stop the Steal rally, people who still stand by the president's side. And I think that the Democrats and Chairman Thompson, in making these selections by picking Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger to be part of this, and we should add there were more Republicans who also voted for certification, and for impeachment that could have been part of this. This isn't like they are the only 2. But why should Democrats be dignifying Republicans who won't even accept the basis of the fact that there was an election that this president tried to steal from the American public and amplify those lies even further? That's what the supporters that we saw breaking down those doors on January 6th want to hear.
But Jessica, how would it have been problematic to make the case and to have even people who are of the mind that you're expressing, have them in the room? I mean, isn't that the way that we do things, where we challenge the supposition of why you're gathered in this room to go through this evidence in the first place? What's wrong with that?
Something that's so core to what's going on now during these hearings, and Congresswoman Cheney laid this out as well, is the importance of how disinformation has polluted these people's minds. And so many of them have testified, since they've been pulled in by the DOJ for participating in this, that they were lied to, that they were brainwashed by President Trump and his allies. And I don't actually see the point in amplifying further those lies that have caused so much damage, that have put us to a place that we have never seen before. And the unprecedented nature of what happened on January 6th and the previous 2 months, where Donald Trump, as Trey pointed out, knew that he had lost the election because his most trusted advisors, like Bill Barr and his own daughter, I did think that was powerful, seeing Ivanka's face up there, had told him that he lost the election, and he continued to lie to the American people. So why continue to amplify that?
The soundbite from Ivanka was less than stellar. I mean, let's play the soundbite.
Let's play it.
How did that affect your perspective about the election when Attorney General Barr made that statement?
It affected my perspective. I respect Attorney General Barr. So I accepted what he was saying.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. It didn't thrill me when I heard that. And listen, there's hours of testimony there. Quickly, Jonathan, what's most striking to me is someone tells the New York Times this is about reframing the midterm elections. Right. Other people say it's about preventing former President Trump from running again. That's really where we are.
Well, the problem is I think the Democrats have fulfilled that narrative. They went out and got an ABC figure to essentially produce this. It's all the buildup has been, you even had a promise from Schiff that you're going to see things you've never seen before. It felt like the run up to Top Gun, you know, and the problem is they now have to fulfill that.
All right.